www.integralnaked.org. Now, somebody that would even recognize that kind of technology or find it interesting or even want to share it with their friends must have had some pretty broad-ranging interest in these kind of topics to begin with.
I started meditating when I was 19.
Yeah.
I was going to the University of Washington, and I had been reading some books about meditation and trying it. And actually, in retrospect, I was doing it just right. You know, I was doing what you're supposed to be doing. But you know, I had no way of really knowing what really was supposed to be happening, because most of the descriptions of what's supposed to happen are so grandiose, and, you know, you're supposed to have all these out-of-body experiences and visionary experiences and all this dramatic stuff. That wasn't what was happening for me, but what was happening was exactly now I know that what happens to everybody when they meditate. But I didn't feel like I really was sure I was doing it right.
Yeah. So,
at any rate, I saw an ad in the college newspaper for a TM initiation. And I thought, well, gee, this is like somebody that teaches you how to do this. Then you can ask them questions, am I doing it right, and so on. So I thought, well, that sounds like a good deal. So I went and paid $35, I think, and got a TM mantra and started doing that. And I did that and a lot of other, you know, I ultimately got very interested in Eastern philosophy and became, you know, pretty well read and all that sort of a thing. And I later learned to do the Kriya Yoga technique that Yogananda's group teaches.
Right.
And pretty much over time learned to do, you know, I looked at Raja Yoga and Kundalini Yoga, that sort of stuff, and looked at you know, all the other branches of what to do and how to do it. And I was going to say tried them, but I was very disciplined. I mean, between 1969, when I first was a freshman in college and started to meditate, until 85, when I started playing around with what became holosync, I was meditating at least an hour a day, and usually 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day. And I was very, you know, and I went into the little pranayama stuff and yoga, you know, hatha yoga and all that sort of thing. So I was pretty well read on all this stuff, and more important, really, I really had a lot of practical experience with it. And actually, the way that I got into this was that a friend of mine that I'd met at a TM retreat, I was visiting him in San Francisco, and as I went out the door to go to the airport, he gave me this cassette tape and said, you should check out this cassette tape. This person has found a way to put some kind of sounds on this that cause people to go into a meditative state. And I, being a very traditionalist, I said, yeah, right. And it was about 10 minutes long, and so I tried it. And I had this incredibly good meditation.
Yeah.
That it reminded me of the kind of meditation that I would have had in maybe a 45-minute meditation on a really good day. And so I started looking into it, what this was all about, and contacted the person that had made the tape and started to learn more about it. And then I read Michael Hutchison's book, Mega Brain, which discusses some of these sorts of things. And
now, was this tape that you tried, was it a simple binaural beat tape?
Yeah. You know, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure exactly what was on it, but it
probably something like
my
that. My
assumption was, based on the experience, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So then I was a graduate student at the University of Portland studying composition, music at the time. And so I went into the engineering lab at the University of Portland and found a professor and said I wanted to borrow some tone generators from them. And so they let me do that. So then I had to, there's some other equipment I had to find that I think I bought through some mail order thing. And so I started making these cassettes in my basement and playing with them. And pretty soon I had 15 or 20 people that would come over to my house once a week, and we would all meditate together using this. And you know, we did that for about 4 years.
Right. Now, how did you, when you were creating different types of holosync tapes, how did you know what kind of effect to go for? In other words, I assume you were continuing to experiment with things like binaural beats, which is, for example, if you play 100 cycles per second frequency in the right ear and 108 cycles in the left ear, the brain will tend to synchronize at the difference between them, in this case around 8 cycles, and that's one of the techniques that can be used to entrain brain waves. And if you were using some of those, How did you know what to go for? Was it because you were continuing to read things like Hutchinson and study the various kinds of brain-mind machines that were and research that was being done? And were you watching effects on your friends? How did you know to go for theta states or try to get delta evoked and so on? Could you talk a little bit about the experimental process you went through in developing these? Because it sounds really fascinating.
Well, all of those things you said certainly went into it. I was aware of a lot of research that the TM people had done. They had a lot of studies where people meditated wearing, EEG electrodes and so on. And so it was pretty well known what brainwave patterns people went into typically when they were meditating, which is mostly deep alpha rhythms, which is between 8 and 12 cycles per second, and with little momentary excursions down into theta, which were very often just for a second or two in those cases, with occasionally someone that was very advanced could hold these theta states for a little longer. You'll probably remember, Ken, that back in those days, there was a period of time where alpha was the big rage.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying, oh, the Holy Grail is to be an alpha.
Yeah.
And you had all these trainings where people were teaching people how to get into an alpha state. This is without any kind of technology or anything. And it was alpha, alpha, alpha for quite a while. And then there came the next wave was theta.
Yeah.
Everybody said, oh, no, it's not alpha, it's theta. Theta's the thing to do, and you're going to be more creative, and you're going to have these hypnagogic, visionary experiences, and so on and so forth. And I guess the other piece here is, a lot of the stuff that Bob Monroe at the Monroe Institute did. Bob, along with Michael Hutchison with Megabrain, those were probably the two influences that kind of got the word out to more people that this kind of technology existed and what it might do and so on. Now, Bob Monroe was a great pioneer in this, and everybody that's interested in this kind of work really owes Bob a big debt of gratitude.
Yeah, he was extraordinary, wonderful pioneer, and we owe a lot to him for pushing into this.
I will say that something happened to Bob when he was first doing this that sent him off, in my opinion, in somewhat of the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And that was that he had these out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, he was always an out-of-body guy, and I always felt that kind of tilted just a little bit what he was doing.
Yeah, just to sort of cut to the chase. For the most part, what I saw Bob doing was saying, what combinations of frequencies can we find that will give us other groovy experiences, other altered state experiences, whether it's we're going to the 13th Bardo and seeing Little Green Men with the Secrets of the Universe. Or, there was some of the stuff that I've seen of his seemed a little on the nutty side to me, but because of the way he looked at this, and also I think Michael Hutchison contributed to this, there was this point of view that what's important is what brainwave pattern are you in?
Yeah.
And what is the increase in some mental ability or the increase in altered state experience that you might have there? And I looked at it a little bit of a different way. I had been reading a lot of Ilya Prigogine, chaos theory, the idea of dissipative structures. When they are overwhelmed by too much input, the chaos builds up in the system
Right.
reorganizes at a higher level,
Right.
it becomes more complex, and so on and so forth, which is just a very elegant description of how everything in the universe, including everything from stars to one-celled organisms and crystals and everything else, how everything really evolves and grows. The upshot of looking at all